My guest today is a talented musician who's played with everyone from Frank Zappa and Steve Vai to Joe Satriani. He has a new album out called Scambot 2. I'm pleased to welcome Mike Keneally. Nice to meet you, man. Thanks for having a few minutes.
Yeah, no problem. My pleasure.
Let me see. You got a lot going on. We'll start a little backwards, or we'll get to the album too. But are you sort of on a little bit of a break now? I know you were touring a lot with Satriani and on the road for a while. Are you on downtime right now?
Not really, because I have a couple of video shoots this month. Like I'm doing one next week up in San Francisco for EMG pickups, and then later in the month I'm doing another one for Pigtronic's guitar pedals. And it's instead of just like rolling into the studio and doing whatever, I've had to prepare a lot of stuff. Like for the EMG thing next week, they asked for me to play along with 4 songs from Scambot 2, the new record. Okay. And that necessitated going back into the studio to do new mixes for that stuff, and also I'm having to practice songs that I haven't actually ever played live before. Right. So it's even though it's just like standing in a video studio and recording 4 songs, I'm having to prepare for it almost like more than I would for a gig, you know.
Right.
And then I do have like a week off after that. I'm going to Arizona to visit my family, so I get a little sort of like time off. Then, but then I come back and I have to do this other video for Pigtronics, which involves a lot of technological stuff that I have to deal with. So it's even though I'm not on the road or doing anything particularly high profile right now, I'm pretty much just as busy as ever.
Nice. I saw you guys with you and Satriani and the guys a few months ago down here in Florida, and the show was amazing. And actually that was the second in a couple of years that I saw, and you were there with him for both. Has that been sort of the main touring thing you've done in the last few years? Has it been with Satch and Brian and Marco?
Yeah, well, when I joined the band in 2010, there was a different there were different bass player and drummer in the group, and we toured for 3 years with that configuration. And then Joe said that he wanted to do a big shake up in the band and get some new blood in there, and he asked me if I had any bass players and drummers I could recommend, and I said, oh yeah. We all thought, well, this is kind of an interesting new direction for Joe to take with the band. Hopefully he'll be into it, and it turns out that he's loved it. Having Brian and Marco in the band, and it's great for me because obviously I know those guys real well, and we have a lot of history together, and we're right. Super comfortable. So it's been, and then as it's turned out, Joe has been just like a machine. It's been very reliable. Every 2 years we go in the studio to make a record, and then we spend a lot of the next 2 years traveling around playing the songs. So for the last 6 years, Satriani has absolutely been the primary touring thing.
Yeah, I kind of myself noticed the renewed energy in the shows. I don't know if that's the right way to say it, but I mean, I had seen Satch 10 times, and
okay.
for years, and then he didn't come to Florida, I think, for a while. Man, I missed a show or something. Then I caught the couple with you guys, and I knew it was the new band, new guys, and knew who you were, of course, and it was like, wow, this is different. This is nice. It was really great. The shows were awesome.
That's great to hear, especially from somebody who's a longtime fan.
Yeah.
And that's been seems to be really kind of overwhelmingly the response from the hardcore Satriani fans is that they can sense that there's a new energy and that they really enjoy it. And Joe has certainly been. He seems real invigorated by the whole thing. So it's been great. And plus he's a really cool guy to work for and with, and his whole organization is really solid. So it's been a very it's been an unexpected thing. When it came up, when he just like called me out of the blue and said, hey, I'd like to try this. And initially I was just playing the keyboards. The first 3 years I was in the band, I wasn't even touching a guitar. But then he said, "Hey, we should get you on guitar for some stuff," and that's when it really started to get fun.
That's cool.
Yeah.
You've played with everybody, Steve Vai, Satch, and the list goes on, Zappa, whoever. What's it like to always have such high caliber musicians on everything you do, from every instrument, drummers, and so on? I mean, you're always surrounded by top level guys, and you yourself are a virtuoso. So, I mean, how does that work with all the projects you do, and what's that like?
Well, I guess I'm kind of spoiled because at this point I sort of accept it as the base reality for my musical life, and I kind of got. I mean, obviously playing with Zappa, gave me a real taste for that. But even pre-Zappa, when I was playing with in San Diego with my brother and whatever other musicians we could talk into playing my weird music. I've always gravitated towards musicians who can really are versatile. I don't require nonstop virtuosity. In fact, that can get a little tiring. But I'm always interested in musicians who aren't predictable every time that they pick up their instrument, and a kind of a wide range of techniques and even just awareness of different kinds of music is sort of required for that. And then I got really spoiled, a few years after the Zappa experience, but before I got in with Steve Vai and everything, when I started making solo records. My first solo record was 1992. And I got a couple of guys in the band, Doug Lunn on bass and Tos Panos on drums. And it was hearing those guys play my music that really made me realize, boy, not only is it a valuable thing for the music to get guys who can really, really play, it's also super inspiring and it keeps me on my game, to have guys in the band who are just as good as I am or better. And at the time in the early 90s when I got these guys in the band, and they just they were far more versed in jazz history and techniques than I was, and they were just incredibly freewheeling masters of their instruments, and to have guys like that in my own band keeping me on my toes is extremely valuable. So I've always wanted to have in my own bands people. I never wanted to be the most talented guy in my own group. Right. It's important to have people around that keep me challenged. So it's been a blessing. It's been fantastic.
I wonder, when you were doing your solo records in the 90s, that was the peak sort of grunge era, and people fawning over guys who didn't really play many notes, I guess, to put it mildly. And I'm wondering, was that something that ever as a musician you went, well, I don't understand that, or you can look at it and go, okay, I get that for what it is?
Well, like all forms of popular music, there's going to be some stuff that's really good that rises to the top, and then there's going to be other stuff that doesn't seem so good. And at the time, because I was in Dweezil Zappa's band in the early 90s, and we were doing a lot of gigging and stuff, and we were kind of, I knew that our singer Amit was really influenced by Elaine Staley from Alice in Chains and stuff, and I was listening to the radio and some of it was, to me, just excellent songwriting.
Right.
Nirvana, to me, those are amazing songs, and that's why that stuff is kind of revered as the top of that style of music. But at the same time, I was hearing a lot of other stuff that fell under the grunge umbrella that just sounded to me like really cheap Nirvana knockoffs. So to me, there was no comparison between the really quality stuff and the imitators. Right. And it's the same way. It was the same way with the Beatles. There was only one Beatles, and then there were a bunch of other bands that tried to sound like them. It's always going to be that case whenever something gets hugely popular. But I was making a lot of records in the 90s that actually had some, my second record, Boil That Dust Back, has some pretty grungy sounding stuff, and certainly influenced by certain aspects. And there's even a song about Kurt Cobain and Courtney Love on that record. but it's all filtered through all the other stuff I'm interested in, and I definitely, I used sort of like the sonic signifiers of some of that kind of music, but then I would run it through the sort of chord progressions that I like, and
Right.
weird ass rhythmic changes that I seem to be addicted to. It's the best of it is always going to be valuable for one reason or another of any style of music. So it wasn't like I was standing around the '90s going, I'm super offended by this genre, and I don't know what to do.
I wonder if a guy who's really excellent at his instruments and musician and is surrounded by all these high level guys, if you can also look at a 3-chord rock thing and go, okay, I get that. That's still pretty good, and that's good. It has merits too. I'm just wondering how someone like you thinks.
Yeah, well, I mean, the first music I ever loved was the Beatles, and they tended to use more than 3 chords, but it wasn't like they were trying to knock anybody out with their technique. They were just trying to write good songs, and it always comes down to that. Really, is the song any good? And you can definitely write a good song with 3 chords, and you can also write a really bad song with 3 chords.
Speaking of albums and songs, your new album Scambot 2, I think it's out today, September 9th, right?
It goes to wide release today, which means that it's available through the more of the usual
Amazon
vendors.
and iTunes and all that. It's a sequel to the first Scambot album, which was 7 years ago. So how long was part 2 floating around in your head, and what made you get to it and release it now?
Well, it's been floating around ever since the first album or before, because I was creating. At the time that I was working on Scambot 1, I was making a lot more music than I needed for that album. So some of the music that ended up on the new record, and particularly on the second record, Inkling, is stuff that was in the works back then. But it's even through the other records that I've made since Scambot 1, like Wing Beat Fantastic with Andy Partridge and You Must Be This Tall and various live records and stuff. Scambot 2 is always been floating around in the background, and it was just like maybe 2-3 years ago that it became front and center, the top priority. It's time to get this thing finished. But I was happy to take a long break since the first Scambot 1 record, because if I had done Scambot 2 any sooner, it might have been more of a like a faded copy of the first one.
Right,
and I really wanted this album to have a very distinct personality from the first one, and it really does. And plus, I just allowed myself time to just make sure that this album was everything that I wanted it to be in terms of the way it sounded and the flow of the music and everything. It was very important to me, and sort of a crucial record in my career to really get it right. And it also helped to wait a while, because I wanted, there's going to eventually be 3 volumes of Scambot, and I want there to be a narrative arc over the 3 where things gradually become less cluttered and maybe just like more focused on the essence of something. And whereas Scambot 1, I think is a pretty darn abstract record, I think Scambot 2 is a little more clear in its melodic content and the song forms. I think it's a more approachable record, and even as you listen to Scambot 2 over the course of the album, it becomes like more opened up and clear even as the album goes. It starts with Within the Trees, which is the most dense and intricate and crazy thing on the record, and then as you go through the album, Scambot 2, it becomes like there's more oxygen being let into the room and a little more air in the arrangements, and just more room to breathe. And then whenever Scambot 3 comes out, years from now probably, I expect it to go even more in that direction, where it just like clearing out clutter, basically.
Okay.
So that's the overriding sonic sort of concept behind Scambot.
Yeah, I mean the new one it covers the gamut of genres and styles and experimenting, especially like you're saying early on in the first half of the album, and it's quite the adventurous record. I absolutely.
Thank you.
I'm wondering, what is the writing and recording process for something like this? Where does an album like this start, and is it all you writing it down, and then how do you get some of the other guys involved? How does it work for you?
It's very little is written down in terms of like manuscript, unless there's something that a guy specifically requests, because generally I'll do demo versions of say the bass and drum parts. I'll play them myself, usually not with real drums, usually with like a drum patch on a keyboard. But rather than programming the drums, which is tedious for me, I'll actually sit there bar by bar and play the drum part on a keyboard. I've gotten pretty good at working the kick drum with my little finger of my left hand, and the snare with the index finger of my left hand, and the hi-hat with the index finger of my right hand, and then you kind of just do a really basic drum part that way. But usually, I mean, yeah, the writing is all me, and a lot of it will be a melody or something that I captured on my phone. Like maybe I'm just traveling through my day doing whatever, and a melody will show up in my head, and I'll sing it into my phone. And then later on, when I get into the studio with Mike Harris, who was the engineer on this album and just about all my albums for the past many years, so we have a good working rhythm. I'll say, hey, I want to start a new song. Let me call up this voice memo on my phone, and I'll get this little snippet of melody, and I'll say, okay, this is going to be the starting point for a new song. And then I'll record that, and then my songwriting process is always, what do I want to hear, because I'm always trying to somehow generate music that is something I've never heard before. That's what excites me and motivates me to keep making songs. So even within a song, it's like if I get a little melody down, a little snippet, I'll listen to that and say, okay, what do I most want to hear? Follow that. And to me, the metaphor that I use is, say I'm at home and I'm putting on a record, and I've just opened up this record, I've never heard it before, and I'm really excited about it. And I put the needle on the top of the beginning of the album, and something comes out of the speakers. What is it? What do I feel like hearing? And that's what I try to write. And so just about every song on the album is starts from some really modest source material, some melody that I sang into my phone, or maybe just something that falls out of my fingers in almost like a reflex action, but it's a sequence of notes that excites me in some way, and that I feel like delving into further. And I'll capture that little piece of initial inspiration, and then just try to build on it and build on it and build on it in a way that doesn't betray the initial inspiration, but hopefully lets it flourish and find some kind of ultimate expression, I guess.
And you wrote so much that you had enough for a second like companion album. Is that Inkling? That's what's the process behind that one? So yeah. I mean, how much do you write when you're putting together an album?
I guess a lot, probably more than I need, because what I'm doing is creating a lot of material, and what I'm looking for is, okay, within this pool of material that I have, what congeals, what wants to sit next to one another in order to really be what I consider to be an album, something that feels like an album, a body of music that belongs together. So I just kept making music and more music because I kept thinking, well, I don't have this kind of song when I need this sort of a song. And a lot of it too of the process is I want something that feels like this, and sometimes it might be something that is is a call back to an earlier time or another band. Like there's a song on Scambot 2 called Freezer Burn, and and all I knew about it is I want a song that is has a kind of a wide open groove to it, a lot of space, and the beginning of it, I know that I wanted to start with these sustained organ chords that kind of sound like Richard Wright, something a little bit early Pink Floyd-ish. And so that is just like, okay, Mike Harris, Mr. Engineer, we're just going to record some organ chords, So I wrote the chords that start the beginning of Freezer Burn, and then sit back and listen to it and figure out what comes next. And so that's just an instinct. It's all instinct. It's all just running on instinct. I think the album needs this kind of song. I think the album's going to need this kind of song. But at that point, I didn't know what order the songs were going to go in, and I didn't know, and I'm like spinning out songs like crazy. And at a certain point, I add them up and I go, holy cow, I've got 2 hours worth of stuff here, and I didn't even realize it. So at that point, okay, is it going to be? Am I going to try to make a 2 CD Scambot 2, something that like has the whole concept that runs, starts at the beginning of disc 1 and ends at the beginning of disc 2, and that felt a little excessive. I decided that I wanted to have the Scambot 2 narrative concept just be contained on 1 CD. But at that point, I had an album's worth of additional material left over, so I put that together and worked for a long time trying to get a proper order together so that it wouldn't just sound like these are outtakes from Scambot 2, but I wanted it to sound like this is an album that has a right to exist in its own right.
Right.
And so there was stuff that I took out of Inkling as well. There's an additional half hour of music that was created that's not on either of these albums. So it wasn't just like put it all out there. It's still like, let's find the stuff that seems to live and breathe comfortably next to each other, so that I ended up with 2 albums that I'm really happy with, and that I think exist separately as complete statements.
Does some of that stem from your time working with Zappa, or learning how to mesh 100 different styles, or experiment? Does any of that come from your time with working with him?
I think so much of what I do probably comes from not just the time working with him, but the time spent listening to him when I was growing up. I was always really just, I guess, enchanted is the best way to put it with not just his work ethic, because obviously he put out an amazing amount of material, and as a fan I was delighted every time he put out a new record. But there was always the excitement of what's this album going to be. They were always seemed so different, and so I appreciated the fact that he had an interest in working in so many different styles, and that he was so adept in like, okay, this is going to be a symphonic piece, but now this is going to be a real straight ahead rocker, and now this is going to be like a chamber piece, but for a rock band rather than a small chamber ensemble. It's like and then he would do a country song, or he might do something that was like really, really beautiful, but put some insane title on it that you would never guess that it was going to be such a pretty song. And so I'm just the act of composition is fascinating to me, because I have no idea how much of it is something that you're kind of receiving from some other source, and how much of it actually generates inside your own head. When I get into all of this composition and arranging and recording and stuff, I have a hard time believing that it's all just coming from inside me. I definitely get the feeling like I'm just sort of like grabbing information as it floats near me.
Right.
So I feel really fortunate that because it's something that I love to do, and it's so much fun to do, and every time I manage to contain these impulses and these obsessions and end up with a finished album that I'm happy with and that other people enjoy, that's the real excitement of it, is when it gets all said and done, somebody else hears it and they feel what I was going for, and they feel the same things I felt when I was trying to make it. That's the most satisfying thing.
That's awesome.
And then I think, honestly, to get back to your actual question, I think it has almost everything to do with Zappa. You know, I was inspired by him in so many ways. You know, and you know, specifically the work ethic and also just the breadth of stylistic diversity. It's I love it.
Yeah, absolutely. So you have the album coming out today, and then you have your tour, I guess, is the next thing after you finish all your videos. It kicks off at Progtoberfest, October 21st, and runs through November. And then what's next year? What do you got planned? What's on the horizon?
I got more Satriani. We're doing Asia and Australia and New Zealand in the early part of the year. And then in the summer, I'm going to be going back to Europe with a trio that I did some shows with earlier this year. A bass player from Finland and a drummer from Germany playing my stuff. And it's interesting. It's a band that I played with in the early 2000s and really, really enjoyed playing with these guys. The bass player's name is Jan Wessman, Jaanwessman. And the drummer's name is Schroeder, Schroeder. And so I hadn't played with them for like 12 years. And then last year, or earlier this year, I got the opportunity to do a couple of weeks of dates in Germany. So I reconvened that band that I played with 12 years ago. And we had such a fantastic time, and people really enjoyed this group. So I'm very intrigued to do more playing with those guys. And right now we've been calling them Mike Keneally and Friends, but I'm kind of tired of that name, so we're casting about for another name for the band, and we have the name the Mike Keneally Report. which
we like the report as a tag. That works.
Okay. So I'll be doing more playing with those guys, but then I also want to do more playing with Beer for Dolphins. With like the tour that I'm doing in October is going to be with Brian Beller and Joe Travers. Joe Travers is the guy that introduced me to Brian Beller back in the early '90s when we were all in Dweezil's band, and of course Joe is also the Vaultmeister for the Zappas. So he's the guy who goes into the old tapes and exhumes things for new release. And Brian, of course, has got the Aristocrats, and then we also have Joe Satriani. So finding time to do Beer for Dolphins is challenging. But I really, to me, it's important to stay connected with these musicians that I've been playing with for so many years. And I'm excited about the tour in October because I've never brought just the trio version of Beer for Dolphins. This particular trio version with Brian and Joe, which we've been playing for well over 20 years, the three of us, and there's a real chemistry between us, something that happens when it's just the three of us on stage, and that I've never brought that to the East Coast or to Chicago or North Carolina or these places that we're playing. So it's I'm super, super jazzed about this tour in October, and I'd like to do more of that as much as possible next year. And then I got this other band that we've been getting together whenever we can throughout the year, that I formed with Chris Myers, who's the drummer from Humphreys McGee, and Pete Griffin, the bass player who used to be in Zappa, plays Zappa, and they're both on quite a bit of Scambot too. And then a vocalist named Ben Thomas, who used to be in Zappa, plays Zappa, and a keyboardist named Jonathan Sindelman, who was very prominently featured at the tribute to Keith Emerson a couple of months ago. And so we've been getting together since January, just writing songs together. And I've never been in a band where everybody wrote songs collectively. I'm always either the band leader writing everything, or I'm a sideman writing nothing. So this is actually the first time that I've been in a collective band situation where everybody's contributing to the songwriting, and that's very exciting. So right now we're just like focusing on creating a repertoire for playing live. We're not thinking about an album just yet. Mm-hmm. We're just like slowly, because everybody's so Humphreys McGee is on tour constantly, so right. Chris Myers is only available on occasion, but whenever we're all in the same place at the same time, we get together and try to just advance our repertoire, and so hopefully we'll have our repertoire together by sometime next year, and we can actually start doing gigs. And so and then at some point, I know Satriani's going to want to do another record, and the challenge is making time for all of it. But I'm very grateful to be busy.
You are busy. That's for sure. Well, listen, man, thanks for taking some time, and good luck to the album and the tour and the 100 bands you have going on. And hopefully we'll see you on the road, or speak again soon, man.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, buddy. Thank you.
Take care.
Bye. Thanks to Mike for the interview. For upcoming news and interviews, please check theprogreport.com, follow us on Facebook, at The Prog Report on Twitter, or download the podcast on iTunes. Thanks.